live. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm one of your co-hosts, Blake Ruffino. Alongside me is my counterpart and co-host, Joe DeLeone. Good evening, good sir. How are you?
I am doing great. I am glad that we are back to our list discussions. I think that this is going to be a very interesting show.
We only missed a night. I know. So here's what I learned today. I'd say I kicked somebody off my list. SEC pretty deep defensively.
Whoa, and also young. Very young. There's a lot of sophomores and juniors that are going to be the best players in the country. But you're right. There's a lot of guys that we could have turned to for this list today.
Like I'm going to open up the show by saying this. I wanted Caleb Banks on my top 5. I do think he's the best interior defensive tackle. I'm just going to say in the SEC, I don't want to say the country. He's not on my list. But there are 5 other players that are on my list that I cannot keep off. Like, just cannot keep off. So there comes a point in time where, Joe, I start asking the question, look, the Big Ten ran defensively a year ago. I think that they ran the country when it came to the talent and level of talent that they had in college football a year ago. Yeah. It's funny because I think about the conversation that you and I had last year where Caleb Downs was like 2-3 in our list, and we're like, bro, Mason Graham might be the 5th best player in the Big Ten defensively. I do think that it's flipped here from a defensive perspective. There are a lot of really good, talented defensive players in the SEC, and by the way, Texas might have 3 of them.
Well, that's the even craziest part, too, is that when we look at the teams where the talent has been stacked, Texas has a lot of it. I think anyone who was downing the takes that I had at the very beginning of the offseason, like a week removed from the national championship, I was all in already on Texas. It has nothing to do with me putting faith into the bucket of Arch Manning. It has everything to put faith into the bucket that is this defense that's not just loaded with good players. We're talking about a bunch of guys today that are 4-star guys that have developed and look really great. Texas is 5-star dudes that are playing like 5-star dudes. That is when the talent starts to actually be actualized on the field. Texas is going to do some crazy shit this year. Their defense was good, and they didn't really lose anybody.
I'm going to counteract that. Does Derek Williams come back at safety and give them the level of play that they had there? You're losing a first-round corner. The front 7 is mainly what you're talking about. Secondary-wise, I don't agree with you there. Secondary-wise, I think they have some challenges that they may have to overcome. But the front 7 might be the best in the country. And I hate saying this, I do not believe that is a very high take. I think that you got to put them at least 1 or 2, regardless of who you are, where you want to line it up. But I would ask the question, who's at 2 then?
Who's the second best defensive line in the country?
Well, no, just front 7 in general, linebacker, defensive line. Like, here's what I'd say. It's easy for us to not know. Like, there's not a Georgia player on our list this year because there's going to be by the end of the year. There's going to be somebody by the end of the year. They literally lost 5 defenders, starting defenders, 4 of them to the Eagles, by the way. Okay. So then they turn around and everybody's like, oh, no, Kirby, I don't think he can replace this. And all of a sudden we come back out and like, wait a minute. Wait, what happened? And so that's ultimately the question. Maybe Texas can do that as well in their DB room. Here's the interesting thought, though, Joe. They also have a new secondaries coach. Their secondary coach moved on to the NFL. So a lot of discussions will have to go on there. Also, let's lead this off with tonight. We've talked more about Stanford football in the last 2 days than we have probably in our entire 2 years of full-time doing this. But Andrew Luck, going back to someone that he knows very, very well, that being Frank Reich. So if you missed it, Troy Taylor, the head coach of Stanford, was fired amongst allegations of Joe, I don't know how else to say this other than he was talking to female employees very harshly, allegedly. With that being said, there was an interim coaching vacancy at Stanford, and the last head coach that coached Andrew Luck was Frank Reich. He's going to be taking over that interim role. I guess your thoughts on this 1-year deal, which, by the way, arguably the worst graphic I've ever seen by On3. Rental? I mean, that's a little disrespectful, but Frank Reich is going to be there for a year. A rental.
He is only coming for he is a rental. He's a rental coach.
Bro. This isn't enterprise rental car, okay? Like,
I mean, it kind of is rental enterprise.
What if they do good and you want to hire him full time? That's the argument that I'm going to make.
Well, part of me feels like this was mutual though. Like seeing the headline and reading the news on this, part of me thinks that this was him saying, "All right, I need something to do for this upcoming year. I didn't get hired. I need to build a little bit of equity back before I get back to the NFL." This feels like that this was a decision by both sides. I'm sure that Andrew Luck tried to convince him to do it full time and to come back fully and be the head coach, but the decision here is that it's only going to be for 1 year. I don't hate this hire. I'm sure that there's people who are going to complain and say, "Oh, he was so awful with the Panthers."
He wasn't awful in Indy, though.
He wasn't. He was a great coach in Indianapolis, and I think that that's easily forgotten. Having more professional coaches in the sport is a good thing. Having more coaches that are from the professional background is only going to help the sport be better, and also these teams that struggle at recruiting be better. It's a very unique approach on how Stanford has gone about this entire offseason with Andrew Luck, with him, all this shit. So this could end up crashing and burning, but I think at the very least, it raises the floor a little bit from what happened with Taylor.
Well, there's a couple of things that I want to bring up here. Number one, I actually like Frank Reich a lot as a coach. Look, he went to Indianapolis as the head coach and was hoping that Andrew Luck would be his quarterback. Then he abruptly retires, and then his career takes a step back. He never probably would have taken the job if you would have told him within a 9-month span that Andrew Luck would be retiring, right? Nobody would have taken that job thinking that you have to rebuild with a quarterback. I think a couple of things here. Number one, this feels like to me that Andrew Luck is returning a favor, right? Because a coach comes in, wants to rebuild with you. He wants to bring you to a Super Bowl. He wants to get to the playoffs. You abruptly retire for your own personal reasons, and good for you. Good for you for making that decision. He was taking a beating. Can I tell you what this smells like to me, though? This smells like to me that Andrew Luck leaked this story to get Troy Taylor out because they did not fire him until it was made public. And then he brings his own guy in. Joe, we're talking about a 2 to 3 day span that this is finalized now. And you don't expect it from Andrew Luck. But I would remind you, his dad was a sitting AD for over 30 years. And who else to get knowledge from than someone who's been in that exact situation before? Rich Rod.
I don't think that premise is arbitrary, but my only counter to that is you have to hire Frank Reich because there's no freaking options. He had to go with somebody that was one of his guys. We're in April right now. Who was he going to hire at the end of March?
Joe, we literally have colleagues of Troy Taylor coming out saying this beats everything that we know of him.
Literally. That's what we talked about last week when we dove into this.
So if you have that, Joe, that'd be like somebody calling me about you and saying, "Bro, Joe DeLeone just did X, Y, and Z." I'm like, first off,
all right, yeah, hold on. Let's not use this.
Okay, well,
bad example.
Okay, well, let's do this. I'll just use me. That's like somebody calling you and saying,
"Sure,
hey, Blake did X, Y, and Z," and you're like, "Okay, that didn't happen." That goes everything against what I know about him, and I've been around him for a long time. That makes zero sense here. Okay, it's like the Cat Williams skit with the white person. He murdered who? It makes no sense. It is an interesting timeline, though, that this gets leaked. They don't fire him until it gets leaked, or they move on from him until it gets leaked. And then the guy's last head coach, who just so happens to be stumbling here, becomes the new interim. Now, I don't think that there's another way that you could tag him other than interim. Now, I do think Andrew Luck, let's just say my conspiracy theory, which is probably what it is, isn't true, okay? It is what it is. They've made him the sitting GM over all football relations. Every move that they make is going on to him, and he goes and gets the one guy that he knows that can take this job over. He's trying to control the situation is what I'm trying to get at. I feel like that this is a control hit. And look, they say they're going on a national search. We'll see. He's not firing Frank, right? I mean, he's probably hoping that they do very well and that he can sell, that they're going to build with him. I don't think that this is a one-year deal. I really, really don't. I really believe you mean to tell me that the guy that you're bringing in right now, and I understand you're in a really tough spot, do you really think that he doesn't want this to work?
Well, I'm sure that he does want it to work. It partially reminds me of when Tom Brady got his involvement with the Raiders and Antonio Pierce was out really quickly, and then they bring in Pete Carroll in the path and how quickly that came together, or how that came together. He was trying to get somebody that he felt comfortable with hiring as the next head coach and not going with the sitting head coach. The other part about this, though,
it doesn't happen to your point. Like this happened in a weekend.
Okay. I'm against this conspiracy theory, though, because for two reasons. We talked about it last week, that he was previously issued a warning that if he didn't improve his behavior, that they were going to fire him. And they fired him because this was a second violation and accusation of him speaking inappropriately to his colleagues. I'm not saying that shows proof that he did it. I think that it's a little odd that you do hear from a lot of people that have been around him that were confused by this because he has never been this disrespectful. Outside of that, though, I think that the fact that the interim tag is placed on this and it's so blatantly out there of like, hey, this is just for this season. I do agree with you that there's probably a hope from Andrew Luck that they are successful, but they wouldn't have hired him just for the short term. If there was some sort of hope, if I was Frank Reich and I was Frank Reich's agent, I would not have agreed to something like this if he hoped to be there long term.
Well, again, goes to my point though. You hire him within a weekend, right? Which let's call it what it is. We've been around enough coaching searches to understand, interim or not, that these decisions make more than a day and take more than a day. They take more than a weekend. I mean, contracts have to be signed, contracts have to be given, agreements have to be met. You have to, sell them on wanting to do this. This is what it, look, call me a conspiracy theorist, that's fine. What it feels like to me on the surface is that they had a situation that they did not feel that they can get from out of, and it being on the West Coast, in a West Coast school, they didn't believe in the vision. They gave Andrew Luck this GM role. So he's like, listen, you know what? We're going to start cleaning house. And you know what we're going to do? We're going to fire Taylor. We're going to move on from this entire situation. And we're going to bring somebody in that, at least for the interim, at minimum, can help us for this year. And then we start rebuilding. Now, Andrew Luck's on this campaign. I don't know if you've been seeing. He's going to Bussin' with the Boys. He's going with all these different places trying to raise money for NIL. He's like, if I'm going to be the GM.
Well, he shouldn't need to raise money. There are plenty of former football player alumni that have made plenty of money. It's kind of depressing that he's trying to do that, but yeah, I know. Well,
for sure. I mean, but he's trying to get the face out there for Stanford football, regardless. Even if he's not needing to raise the money, he's trying to get his face out. When's the last, Joe, before this happened, Andrew Luck literally was invisible. No, he was nowhere to be seen. He's trying to be out in the public eye to make Stanford football relevant. And listen, I'm not saying that he's right or wrong in this decision, but what I am saying is it feels like to me that there was a lot going on behind the scenes, and then you're just putting the cherry on top for me and hiring your last head coach that just so happens to be available.
Okay. I got a counter take here.
Okay.
I would argue that this maybe actually plays into and clearly displays Andrew Luck's naivete, his lack of experience, and maybe even him panicking in the situation. He's presented with the investigations, the context of what has happened in the past, immediate panic reaction. We have to fire him. We can't deal with this. And he puts his name on it for a reason, because the school, maybe they felt uncomfortable with him, but they were not the ones who pushed him. And they said, if you're going to fire him, you have to come out and say that it was done by you. He then panics as quickly as possible, calls the first guy that he knows that's available looking for a job, and hires him on the spot. Instead of doing a long, process to look for a coach. Now I know that I don't know what their
long process though. I mean,
I know he doesn't. I know he doesn't. I don't know when their spring practices are. That was probably part of the motivation.
It's got to end by the end of April. I mean, they got to start now.
I'm just trying to say that the way that this is operated is against every precedent for firing a coach, regardless of when they were fired, and then hiring the next guy. I think that this is a clear picture of Andrew Luck not knowing what he's doing.
Well, he's also I don't know about that. I mean, again, it feels like a move to me that I'm on the opposite end. I feel like it's a move that a sitting AD of 30 years, his dad, would have pulled. Like, I don't think Andrew Luck does not call his dad and say, "Hey, what would you do here?" I don't think in any world that exists. Okay, you could be right, but listen. We didn't even talk about him being a coach. Okay, we brought this in a whole different direction. As a coach, I think it's great. I mean, I quite frankly, I think it might be an upgrade. Okay, offensive play calling, we'll see what goes on there. They do not have the players, so they still might not win a game. It's a tough situation to be in, but it's a full-on rebuild. Yeah. And you could give it to Frank Reich. Maybe he can rebuild it. We'll see. All right, let's get to it here. Joe, we'll talk about our top 5 SEC defenders next, but we got to talk about our good friends over at betonline.ag. Before we do that, everybody do us a favor. Hit the like and share. Joe, almost to 14,000 subscribers on YouTube.
Less than 50 away right now. We're 48 away.
48 subscribers. If you haven't done so already, do us a favor. Hit that subscribe button and notification bell wherever you guys listen to podcasts. By the way, Rafael Devers, the Boston DH / third baseman, has a torpedo bat and went 0-16. He struck out 15 times in those 16 at bats.
What a dipshit.
Well, everybody's saying it's cheap. Would you rather people illegally injecting steroids into their ass to try to hit more home runs?
Well, I think it's hilarious to paint this picture that like, oh, well, the Yankees cheated. Look what they did. And then now other guys are using it and they don't know how to use the damn bat.
Well,
I think that's funny about it.
Technically, the Yankees weren't the first ones. The Minnesota Twins had a game before them, and 4 of their players used it before the Yankees even strapped up for a game. See, here, that's the problem. Yeah,
I thought it was a Yankees coach who was the one who.
No, he's not even with the Yankees anymore. He left in 2018. He's with the Marlins. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's with the Marlins. But the Twins were first. Cody Bellinger came out and said, "Hey, the Cubs were like really trying to push me to do this." Aaron Judge said I had 53 home runs, and the year before that I hit 60 plus. Y'all might want to shut up about what I'm doing. All right. Y'all not here for that. Joe, our top 5 SEC defenders. We continue on our list here, but today we go to the SEC and we talk about these top 5 defenders in our list. Joe, who are your top 5 SEC defenders on your list?
My top 5, number 1, Anthony Hill Jr. from Texas, the linebacker / edge rusher. Dylan Stewart, pass rusher from South Carolina. Number 3, Collin Simmons, the pass rusher from Texas. Number 4, LT Overton, the Alabama defensive lineman. And lastly, Jermod McCoy, the Tennessee cornerback.
Just for everybody for note, this was not the list that Joe had literally
all right
ago. But nevertheless, here are my top 5, Joe. We're pretty much in lockstep for the first 3. Anthony Hill Jr. is my number 1, the linebacker edge rusher out of Texas. Dylan Stewart, the USC, but South Carolina edge. Collin Simmons out of Texas as well. Sertain Perkins from Mississippi, the defensive lineman, DN linebacker hybrid. And Patrick Payton, the edge rusher out of LSU. Let's start off here.
I spelled Suntarine Perkins wrong, by the way, on the graph. Actually, I copied and pasted what you texted me, so that's on you.
Okay, sorry. I don't know how to spell, so you need to make sure.
Yeah, that was my fault. I shouldn't have trusted you.
But the top of our list, Anthony Hill Jr., Joe, the number 1 defender in the SEC for us. An absolutely fantastic year a year ago. 113 tackles with 8 sacks and an interception. What a masterful showing by the guy who, by the way, moved from edge to the middle linebacker spot and did some really good things for the Texas Longhorns this year.
I am so obsessed with watching Anthony Hill Jr. play linebacker. And it's really interesting watching him play, knowing over the last few years, we've had a lot of these hybrid style linebackers. We've had a lot of hybrid style players, but there's been a lot of focus on Micah Parsons in the NFL. There was a lot of fanfare for Harold Perkins, and he got banged up. There's been a bit of misuse by LSU's defensive coordinators over the past couple of years. Separate conversation for a completely different show. And on top of this, Jalen Walker in this upcoming draft class is going to be highly drafted, playing a hybrid role at Georgia this past year. Yep. Anthony Hill Jr. is the best out of any of these guys not named Micah Parsons, because I see a player who knows how to be consistently disruptive and is a freakish athlete. The stats that we've rattled off here, 8 sacks, 16 tackles for loss. He is in the backfield so much. He is too fast for offensive linemen to catch him at the line of scrimmage when he shoots gaps.
Yep.
He has the athleticism and also quietly the hands to win as a pass rusher. He just needs to improve his instincts a little bit more as an off-ball linebacker, and the 113 tackles he had last year could go up even more. There is no better choice than going with Anthony Hill Jr., knowing what he did as a true freshman and how important he was for Texas's top-ranked defense this past year. He belongs at the top of this list.
See, here's the problem. He only got better inside. I mean, let's go to the Ohio State game when, look, what did Judkins run? A 4.45, I think was his 40.
Yes.
And then he's trying to catch the outside, and you have a defensive end running him down. I mean, basically it's what you're calling him, right? I mean, so you have a guy that was playing off-ball linebacker that one of the faster running backs in the country could not catch the edge on. The problem,
he's a 4.3 guy. He's going to run that fast at the combine when he goes.
He will run that. I mean, you never know. I mean, you never know, but he's tracking him down. Like, because time speed and then like on-field speed, I feel like are two completely different things. He's still catching him. The uniqueness is, I think he's more unique than Micah Parsons is. Like, Micah Parsons moves along the defensive line. He'll go to one edge to the other. So will Abdul Carter or whoever you want to lump in that list. This dude can do both of them. That's the danger in him. Joe, I don't think he has a true position. Like, I think, in a year from now, teams are going to salivate on, bro, we could mix and match, and we can do all this kind of different stuff with him at edge and playing off-ball linebacker. Joe, I can make the argument he's the best off-ball linebacker in the country just because of everything that he brings as a total package. He, by far, for what it's worth, and that front seven of Texas, for what it's worth, is centered around him. Everything that I when I see Texas, or teams that try to defend Texas, centers around how do they defend him. I think that's why Collin Simmons, who we'll talk about next, went off the way that he did last year, because everybody focuses in on zero. Joe, the thing is I agree with you. Early in the year, some off-ball linebacker stuff kind of hurt him. You talked about shooting gaps and doing different things. He never had played the position, ever, since maybe Little League, right? Like, I mean, okay, cool. He still developed during the season, and we saw someone blossom right in front of our eyes. Joe, I'll be real with you. This time last year, I was wrong on something. I did not know if he could make that massive transition inside. Well, shit, he proved me wrong. I mean, he proved a lot of people wrong, because it's just so difficult to do that. But he did. Joe, the thing with him is I do think he needs to get better in coverage, right? I do think Ohio State at the end of the game there kind of exposed him for what it's worth. But it doesn't matter. Like, the running game is where he was the most proficient, and still getting after quarterbacks is where he's most proficient. He's an absolutely electric player. And which talked about, I mean, it freed up the true freshman in Collin Simmons.
Right. To round out with Anthony Hill, though, you just brought up, I think, like a really key point. The thing that I always get really juiced up about when I'm watching a prospect is a prospect when they're improving on a game-by-game basis, when they're getting better. Abdul Carter has been a guy that I've brought up a lot this cycle on why he is the best prospect in the class. And it's because introduced to a new situation, a new setting, and not only did he win with his athleticism, but on a game-by-game basis, he was finding ways to improve and to get better, and he was showing more nuance for the position.
Yes.
That is what separates just a good athlete who's just out there on the field making plays. and a premier athlete that is improving and getting better and becoming one of the top players at his position. I really think at the end of this year, we're going to be talking about Anthony Hill Jr. as one of the best linebackers, best defensive players in the history of the sport. He could be that good. He's played and he's been this productive in his first 2 years. He's had no time to just like sit and learn and to physically develop. He's just been thrown right into the mix. I don't think that's crazy to say if he plays his potential.
I can't go there with the defenders that we've had in the last decade.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah, I mean, like, for an example, Travis Hunter just won the Heisman. I know that that's different, but
I wouldn't put him in that package. I wouldn't put him there.
With not putting him and lumping him in is you can't hurt him for playing both sides of the ball either. Like, he might be the best receiver and he might be the best cover corner. Hey, we're giving you the benefit of the doubt of being an edge rusher and an off-ball linebacker. Why am I not giving Travis Hunter that same situation here? I get what you're saying, but I think of – all right, Homer alert. I think of Tyrann Mathieu. Like, like, people forget, like, the 11 turnovers, then the touchdowns, like, 7 touchdowns as a defender. Like, I don't know if I can put him in that specific category, okay? But – shit, he ain't far behind it. I'm not off with you on saying that. He ain't far behind it. He just gonna have to have one hell of a special year, and sometimes things just gotta fall your way. But arguably might be the best pass rusher on their team, definitely the best linebacker in the SEC. Gotta get better in coverage. I think that he, had some issues there, but like we said, it freed up guys like Collin Simmons, who we'll talk about now, who Joe. Shit. Dude, they're the best front seven in the country. I'll just go ahead and say it. I don't care what anybody says. We talked about Anthony Hill Jr. here, but I got Collin Simmons in 3, and so do you. Let's go ahead and lump them in together here. I mean, Joe, 2 top 3 defenders on the same team. Everything that Anthony Hill does frees up guys like Collin Simmons. God, but Collin Simmons is just so damn good. In the playoffs, really validated that top 10 ranking coming out of high school.
I don't think people realize how insane it is that Texas in back-to-back years have had true freshman defenders that have immediately stepped in and played at the same level as some juniors or most juniors in the country would. 9 sacks, 14 tackles for loss. Just a freaky, natural kid that just knows how to go out there and win. Showed some detail to playing the position, some technique, and he's not just trying to go out there and win as an athlete. He's another player as he fills out and he gets coached up more and more.
Yep.
I'm attracted to knowing what he's going to do and how much better he possibly could get. This is a player that has future first rounder written all over him. I would be shocked if he doesn't end up being a future first rounder. I just hope that he has more of a progression than a guy like Michael Williams. 2 years ago, we talked about Michael Williams coming into his second season and how he showed so much promise, but he never took that step forward. He kind of just stayed the same. Collin Simmons takes the step forward. He will go on to be one of the best defenders in college football and only add to his sack total.
The 48 tackles that he had, the double-digit tackles for loss, the 9 sacks, none of that. And I mean absolutely none of that means shit for me. Can I tell you why?
Why?
SEC championship game. Georgia cannot run the football. Trevor Etienne busts one for the first time to the outside. Game is on the line. Game is on the line. He tracks down a running back from the far hash to the sideline to prevent Georgia from getting 7. They'd have to kick a field goal. Now, they'll ultimately win the game. Game is on the line. When you have these elite and special individuals, we question motor, we question heart, we question integrity sometimes. Some people do. The kid was probably asking $1 million coming out of high school, and there's 133 teams in the country that would pay $1 million today to go and get him. It's the intangibles. The stuff that you cannot teach. Joe, he had one move, Everybody knew what he was doing. And look, he's going to have to work on that, right? Like, I mean, people now know what you're going to do. They've had a whole off season to work on it. Their little dip and rip move, good luck on it, okay? Because people are going to be ready for it. You better spin inside. You better do a little fake inside. You better do a lot of different things because people will be ready for it. Here's the problem. I never have to worry about effort, ever. And here's the thing. He didn't start.
Right. He was rotating for the most part. And
Joe,
that was the production that he produced.
Plays. He was a third of their – Trey Moore was the guy that started ahead of him. Trey Moore started over Collin Simmons until the Ohio State game. Go and look it up. I went and looked it up today. They said that he had starts. That's bullshit. How much Texas football did we watch? A lot, because we talked about Vandy. We talked about Georgia twice. He was not in the starting rotation in that first series. Now, you can consider him a starter however you want to do it. Joe, he did this as a part-time player.
When I ripped through watching his film, that was like the first observation to me. And like, I didn't check how many starts he had. I knew he wasn't, they had so many different guys that they were playing that he wasn't like on the field every single snap. But when I was watching him, it was like, all right, next play, next play, next play, next play. Oh, he's on the field. Next play, next play, next play, next play. Oh, he's back on the field again. There were a lot of gaps between he was on the field. So that plays to the nuttiness of this, that he had 9 sacks and 14 tackles for loss.
Harold Perkins did.
I think you got to just keep him on the field. Yeah, you got to just keep this kid on the field and let him continue to grow and to develop.
Hot take time. You ready?
Oh, no. Okay. What do you
got to get better in the running game.
That I feel is a natural concern for a freshman defensive lineman, and that's probably why he wasn't a full-time starter. He didn't have the weight in his ass to be a kick-ass run defender.
He did. Can we call a spade for a minute? Let's call it like we see it. When he came on the field, they checked at the line, Ohio State, and they ran the ball right at him. I mean, let's call it what it is. I mean, like, I'm not – we said the same thing for a lot of these elite pass rushers. Guess what we're about to do next? We're going to talk about Dylan Stewart. Guess what? Same exact thing happened. So this is not a shot at him at all. He's got to be better in the run game. You can't be just coming in and out on third down and be a pass rush specialist if you want to be elite. But I'm not worried about that with him. I think he will be elite. I'm not worried about it, nor should you be worried about it. I think he's going to be very special. And here's the thing. Name a better duo at edge than Anthony Hill Jr. in some situations and Collin Simmons.
That's what I want to elaborate on here to close out this talking point with these lists. They create the best front seven in college football.
Without
the remaining cast is good, but when you have 2 former 5-stars, there were 2 of the most recruited players at their positions in their respective classes that have played as well as they have this early on in their careers. The rest of the supporting cast just needs to be decent, good, quality players. And they've got better than that. This Texas front seven is going to carry them through a lot of important victories. They need Arch, and we have spent enough time talking about him, so we're not going to keep talking about him right now. But I really do believe that Texas winning a national title, or at least competing for one and reaching one, is going to be off of the backs of their defensive line kicking the crap out of opponents. There are going to be games like we've seen in the past with Georgia. Maybe not to the degree of that 2022 team, but how many times did we see Georgia in the past where it was like, man, defensive line won the damn game. Nobody can get the ball out. They can't run the ball. That is what it's going to be like, I think, this year with Texas.
I said this in the open. I just want to emphasize this again. I'm 1,000% with what the statement that you just made. Don't disagree. You're replacing what I thought was the best safety in the SEC a year ago in Makumba. Okay. The corner, Barron, or you replace
Barron.
Right, Jahdae Barron. Does Derek Williams come back and does he have a steady production with him? I understand that the front seven will win you championships. It did it for Georgia. I also remember when that defensive front for Georgia got locked down by Bama in that SEC championship game, and they couldn't produce. And Bryce Young and the boys, and even the following year, Jalen Milroe and the boys went in there and beat you. So just to specify, I'm with you. They are the best front seven in the nation. The back end scares me. You losing your DBs coach. You're also like having to replace a lot. That's a lot to overcome, regardless of how much you select 5 stars. So we'll see there. I agree with you. Joe, at number 2, both of us have DeLeone Stewart, the South Carolina edge rusher, who burst onto the scene last season for South Carolina. You know what's so funny about DeLeone Stewart is that he only had 6.5 sacks last year, and I think Kyle Kennard took like 7 of them from him.
Right. I don't think a lot of people the stats don't reflect how good DeLeone Stewart was last year. At all. He's one of those guys that when you put on the film, it's like, holy shit. It is some of the craziest film that you will ever watch for a true freshman defensive end. The things that he's capable of doing in the intensity that he plays with is unheard of. It is like watching a lion hunt down a gazelle, watching this dude the way that he plays. There was one play I was watching, I put on the Kentucky tape, and it was pretty early in, and Brock Vandegrift's poor slow ass was trying to get away from him. And I watched DeLeone Stewart clear a tight end, clear an offensive tackle, plant, and accelerate. And before Brock Vandegrift could even, he was trying to just run to the sideline, completely dropped his ass. The way that this kid plays is so mesmerizing. Yeah. And he is only going to go on to get better. He has to be number 2 on these lists ahead of Collin Simmons, because I don't think that his impact was truly depicted by the stats that he had.
Could he have gotten a 9 sacks if he made a playoff with the run that Texas did? And by the way, Texas had 4 extra games. He could have easily gotten to it. By the way, he had arguably the best edge from a pass rush standpoint in Kyle Kennard on the opposite side. Joe, I had a statement, or I had a question to Emory Jones, who's in the draft, and Will Campbell, that's in the draft this year. You know what I asked him? After the South Carolina LSU game, I was like, hey, man, those edge – cause this is really – remember, go back to us recapping that game, right? When we recapped LSU and South Carolina, the notion coming out from 2 guys that will be, I say, moderately highly drafted with Emory Jones and Will Campbell. They said that might have been the best duo edge rush that they had ever seen. By the way, they faced a defensive line with Braden Fisk, Jared Verse, the NFL MVP, Rookie of the Year. By the way, Patrick Payton, who's on my list, also was on that team. He was like, bro, no. Kyle Kennard and DeLeone Stewart were the best. You had one that would beat you with power and the other beat you with speed, and they would mix match. It was a hell of a deal. This kid is special. He is special. Can I ask you a question?
Okay.
I don't worry about Collin Simmons, who we just got done talking about in the running game. Why am I worried about DeLeone Stewart? I am worried. I don't think
you should. I don't think you should be. Why? Why are you worried about him?
Because I feel like when they ran to his right shoulder, so the inside part of his leg, when he had to go into the guard on a zone blocking scheme situation, he got washed away. If he played outside the tackle, so the outside right foot of the tackle, he was exceptional. But every time he had to get into the trenches and work, I understand it. We're talking about a freshman. But, Joe, he only had 23 tackles. 23. That means outside of
getting he still had 10.5 tackles for loss, though, so he's still generating
6.5 of those come from sacks.
Okay. I'm not worried about that.
That means 1 tackle behind the line of scrimmage every 4th game.
Okay. I'm not worried about it because I see a kid who's giving 100%, 110% effort.
He's got a high motor now. I'm with you.
He's got a high motor. One of the thoughts that came to mind when I was watching him, this isn't a direct comparison, but it made me think of the circumstance. James Pierce Jr. I don't think that he's going to be James Pierce Jr. James Pierce Jr. 2 years ago, a lot of people were saying and noticing, like, man, this kid's gifted. And his sophomore year was amazing. He had a lot of really good tape. He had a lot of really good, just raw athleticism that was on the field.
Yes.
And everybody's thought and expectation, we said on this show, I said it on the draft content that I host and produce. I said, this kid if he takes a step forward, has every tool in the toolbox to be one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. But he has to be better and tougher against the run. He has to add more weight. He needs to be more physical. All of those things. He can't just run past dudes. I don't see that issue with DeLeone Stewart. But I bring up that comparison because it's a lot of that same tape where you see the athlete winning. But the athlete needs to learn how to really play the position. And I think that DeLeone Stewart's going to. I think that you have a much more consistent high effort than you did with James Pierce Jr. And right now, we're finding out during the pre-draft process from people I've heard from in the league have referenced the fact that James Pierce Jr., like you see it on film, has attention to detail concerns, focus concerns, effort concerns, the effort that he was putting in off the field. There's a lot of concerns there. I don't think the same thing applies for DeLeone Stewart. I just don't.
Kid got paid $1.5 million to stay, and they announced it. So either one or two things are going to happen. Either he does take a step back, or he's like, I want more of this money. That's what kids don't understand. Look, never mind. Go ahead.
All I was going to say is that's what Ryan and I talked about the other day on our draft mailbag that we did, is he pointed out that a scout had told him that what NIL now provides them the context of knowing that they've never known before is what happens when these kids get a little bit of money? What happens when they get money? Do you start goofing off? Do you start dicking around during the season? You're like, oh man, I got my 1.5 million. I don't need to put the same amount of effort in. You think about that subconsciously of like, man, I've made it. I'm just going to go out and do what I'm doing. I think that this is going to be really telling on how if his production goes up.
Here's my hot take, and I told you couldn't use it, but I think this is a unique situation.
Okay.
Kyle Kennard not being there kills him because he will be the entire focus, because you have Imawari that's gone. You have who was the other safety? Kilgore that's gone. You have
TJ Sanders is gone, who's really
TJ Sanders is gone. And then now you have Kyle Kennard that's gone.
Demetrius Knight also at linebacker's gone.
I mean, listen, the stats probably won't tell all on DeLeone Stewart this year. Probably won't. When he's able to play free, he is lightning in a bottle. You got to watch him at every given moment. I do think that all the replacements at South Carolina burn him this year, and I think it's gonna be a tough year for him. I think he's still gonna be top 5 on my list next year, though. Like I really do. I'm not gonna hate on the kid because Shane Beamer, they didn't recruit well. Like, that's not on him.
I think the way that we're gonna learn about how good DeLeone Stewart is,
can he do it by himself?
Right, is how does his performance change when he is now the guy that everybody knows about? And there's going to be a lot of extra attention. They're going to run away from him. They're going to slide protection in his direction. He's going to see a lot of double teams. How does he step up to the occasion? And I think that his performance this upcoming year is not going to be painted by his production. It's just not going to be. It's going to be, how is his effort on every single snap when he's getting all this extra offensive protection attention? And how do his teammates respond, and do they take advantage of it?
I agree. Joe, number 4 on your list is Alabama edge, LT Overton. And on mine, it's Certain Perkins, the Mississippi State defensive lineman. Where do you want to go here?
I'll jump to LT Overton really quick.
Okay.
Look, I've watched LT Overton's tape very deeply because I thought he was going to be in this upcoming class. I know that his production isn't there. And we have hyped up Shamar Stewart this draft class a shitload, his former teammate, who had even less production. I think Shamar Stewart made the right decision going back to school. I think that you get him back for one more year, and he's only going to get better.
LT Overton?
LT Overton, sorry. Overton has some of the rarest athletic tools and flexibility that we look for in a defensive lineman. I think that at Alabama, them needing him to step up to the plate and him being likely their best defender this upcoming year, he is going to take a step forward. But you pointed it out to me before the show that I almost forgot to put him on. I'm glad that you reminded me because I love watching this kid play.
The problem that I have with these lists that we do, not necessarily about LT Overton, is, Joe, you're leaving off somebody that had 8.5 sacks more than he did. And even if I'm not talking about an edge, I go to a guy like Caleb Banks out of Florida, who I do think is the best interior defensive lineman in the SEC. I mean, look, he's an edge guy. He plays more inside-ish, I guess, as a true head-up 5, whatever. But he may be freakish. It's just the production's not there for him. Now, could it take a massive leap? I mean, I have not studied his film as much as you have, and I will digress to not watching as much as you have on him. But for me, the flip side would be, if I'm going with somebody with that similar body type of what they were asked to do, I go with a guy like Caleb Banks, who absolutely destroys human beings. Like, here's what I ultimately believe. I have been burned outside of Walter Nolan, in my humble opinion, with that entire draft, that entire recruiting class that A&M had. All of them.
Okay.
All of them. I've been burned with them. Now, Walter Nolan went somewhere else. So did LT Overton. I thought the production would go up. Here's the problem with him. I do think the production has an issue to do with that they play too high, man too high, and he was on an island by himself having to go up on one-on-ones, and he couldn't win them. So it's maybe they get some more production for him. Maybe they send some more heat this year. Film is film until the production just is that light in some instances. You say it's not here, it would caution me.
And to stay specific to the guy that you had listed at the same spot in Suntarine Perkins, I think that they're two completely different stories.
They are.
And
they are.
For a very direct reason. Suntarine Perkins had a lot of sack production this year. Ole Miss was the most productive defensive line this year in the SEC at getting sacks. If there is a player that drops off a cliff in production because the entire supporting cast that was in front of him and near him, Chris Pupal's gone, Walter Nolan's gone, Princely Umamiela's gone, Jaden Ivey's gone, the whole group is moving on. That was one of the most prolific defensive lines that we've seen in the last 5 years in terms of the talent that was accumulated and brought into that group. Suntarine Perkins is a perfect example as a very, very undersized linebacker listed at 210, who's short, who's got great long speed, but plays a lot of cleanup duty. He is a guy that is going to benefit from the guys around him that are creating and diverting attention. Offensive lines didn't know who to block. LT Overton did not have that same supporting cast. That's why I have a big pause on
both of them went on one-on-ones, and one's an edge and one's an edge.
But we know that they're two completely different types of edge players. You said Overton's a head-up 5 for the most part, and that defense is a little thicker, and Perkins is like a 100%. Like Jalen Walker. He's like Jalen Walker. He's that stand-up blitzing rusher.
But I have one at 5 and I have one at 5A. Meaning, for technical terms, I have one that's head up and I have one that's outside the tackle's shoulder. So I understand what you're saying, but even then, like there are 4 other dudes I'd put on here besides LT Overton. But the problem is that you watch the kid's film and you love him, so I can't argue with you on that. And look, mine's Caleb Banks, right? Like, so your LT Overton is my Caleb Banks. And listen, it is criminal. It is criminal that I am coming out here with a top 5 list and Caleb Banks from Florida is not on it. It is criminal.
You should have put him on. I don't know why you didn't.
Look, I don't know why I would love to do a whole segment on the kid.
You should have. Well, we already did a whole segment on the kid.
We did.
Kept Pat Payton off, and you should have put Banks on.
Do that. I can't do that. I can't do that. You know I can't do that. The problem is I get the same type of player with more production. And by the way, I think he's better than LT Overton in run defense. This kid, Caleb Banks, he eats double teams for breakfast and then takes a whey protein shake and says, oh, that's funny, and then just destroys them again. The kid is so
I like
special.
Banks. I want to break down his tape. I need to break down his tape more.
Joe, don't go for the first 5 games. Go from Texas on. You're welcome.
Right.
He's the best interior defensive lineman in the SEC. All right. In reference to Perkins for me, I didn't mention him at all, and he's on my list. I'm with you on the sack. I'm with you on the sack production. Here's the problem with what I have with everybody looking at him, his weight, everything. He had 60 tackles. By the way, he didn't start. He had 60 tackles, 10 and a half. Well, we did the same thing for Collin Simmons. And I understand the weight concern. I understand your weight concern. The dude was rotating on the best defensive line in the country last year, that being Ole Miss, and he still had more production than all of them. Literally.
But I think that's kind of telling, is it not? Like, is that not telling? For me, that's telling if a guy has that much sack production amongst the best defensive line.
Okay,
that paints the picture of how
6.5 sacks
from
the
the
year
guys around
before they got there.
Well, that's a pretty big jump.
4 sacks? I mean, yeah, it's a big jump, but at the same time, I mean, it's not like he didn't have production.
The other thing that we have to point out is that he had 4 sacks. He had 10.5 sacks this year. He had 4 sacks against Oklahoma. So his numbers are kind of being carried by a game against a really shit
Hey, you know what? You know who played Oklahoma too? With a shit offensive line?
LT Overton?
LT Overton.
Was he healthy for that?
I don't give two. So now there's health concerns. That's even worse.
Well, if he didn't play in the game, then it's a little bit.
It's even worse for your argument. All right. Last ones here are number 5.
He did play against Oklahoma.
At number 5, you had the Tennessee corner, Jermod McCoy, one of the best corners, if not the best corner in the SEC. And at number 5, I have Pat Payton, the LSU edge. Let's go to McCoy first. Your thoughts on him?
I mean, hell, I'd go as far as to say I think Jermond McCoy is the best cornerback in the country. I really like Mansoor Delane. I think that Mansoor Delane is a very good player, and we're going to spend a lot of time talking about him when we do the LSU preview. He was originally on my list, but I bumped him off in order to fit on LT Overton in my last second change. Jermod McCoy, size, length, hip fluidity, ball skills, he checks every single box. The pick that he had against Alabama was a complete insane highlight play. This kid burst onto the scene early, got better every single week, and is only going to continue to get better. I know that Tennessee is losing a lot of their defensive line production. They're losing a lot of guys. Omar Norman-Lott's gone. James Pierce Jr. is gone. Now it is going to come down to the performance of their secondary. And I really believe that McCoy is going to be a driving force for Tennessee's defense, being maybe not just as good as last year, but very consistently stout.
The interceptions don't stand out to me. You know what stands out to me? The PBUs.
Yep.
Like, he's always around the ball. You know what else stands out to me is how physical he is.
Extremely. He's got the perfect build to be physical.
God, dude. And listen, he looks, pause on this, he looks long when he's playing, but he's 6 foot, 200 pounds.
Yeah.
Right? Like, yeah. So he's got long attachments as Nick Saban.
Okay, you didn't have to put it down.
Well, as Saban used to say, he's got long attachments, meaning he might be 6 foot, but he's got wingspan that's 6'8". And I don't know if this kid's got, but it feels that way. I love how he plays the game of football. I think this is a great pick by you at 5. I mean, look, I went way too defensive line heavy here, but who am I going to leave off? His physicality wins him a lot of reps that I think his speed doesn't, if that makes sense. Like, I don't think that Ryan Williams at any given point was slower than him. But when he got up to the line of scrimmage and he got press man and he goes, get off this line, watch this shit. And he jams him in the chest and everybody's like, oh, shit. And then Ryan, what happened? Ryan Williams literally went to the opposite side of the field to get production. Yeah. They had to go away from McCoy. That is a fact that happened. Kid was a great cover corner all year. And by the way, if you think that he won't come up and knock your block off, you're insane too.
He plays every way that you need a defensive back to play. And I thought that was really interesting when I was digging into his advanced stats. 50% completion percentage on targets that were thrown his way.
Insane.
And he didn't give up I think he only gave up like 300 yards last year, which
That's
is
insane.
like through 12 games. That's nuts. Overall, 13 games because they played in the college football playoff.
I thought he was
a
the
fantastic
best corner that went one-on-one against Jeremiah Smith.
Same with Ryan Williams, the two best guys that we've lauded when we've talked about these guys.
How nuts would both we're saying, hey, he covered 2 freshmen.
Right.
Well, I mean, it is what it is. All right, last but not least, before we get out of here, I had at number 5 for me, Patrick Payton, the edge at LSU.
I like Patrick Payton. We've been over this before. I was really bullish on him coming into the season, and then Florida State sucked ass, so it was a complete joke trying to support any Florida State players. I really think, and as you have talked about, a change of scenery for Patrick Payton is going to only help him get better. I think that this is going to be huge for him being at LSU. He has the tools to take over, and from what you keep telling me, he has looked pretty freaking dominant during the spring.
Got off, I'll tell you the play sequence. Red zone, got off a play, ran down the fastest running back on LSU's roster at edge. By the way, I don't know if you saw this, but the guy that beat him by a 10th of a second, Jelani Watkins, tied the NCAA and SEC record in the 100-meter dash this weekend. I don't know if you saw that. So the guy that was literally right below him, Patrick Payton, ran from the opposite side to track him down on a 4th down in a spring practice to end the practice. The thing with him coming into it was I was tried to be convinced to that, Joe, his motor wasn't any good. And then I see him during the spring, and I'm like, wait a minute. If he's doing this during the spring practice, what makes me think that he won't do it during a game? I think that the production for him, which 4 sacks, 11 tackles for loss a season ago, dude, they were 2-10. Dysfunction was around him all over the place. By the way, let's go to 2 years ago. He led the country in pressure rate. He led the country in pressures. Joe, he's got 32 tackles for loss in the last 2 seasons. 32. I mean, like, what? So I do think before we get to this LSU preview, I will just say this in closing. You talking about edge, and we talked about Texas. Hey, look, bro, I come in here and joke around a lot, like, like LSU fan and whatever. All right.
I trust you.
All right, motherfucker. Like, hey.
I trust you.
Hey, I'm dead serious when I say this. I talked about this shit with Jaden, and look, there's some shit you don't make up, but when your eyes are seeing it, your eyes are seeing it. Joe, he's doing it in spring. So the biggest concern that I had on the kid was what? Motor. He's locking shit down in a spring practice. So if I'm getting that now, I will say this. I'll say this. The competition around him, I think, has elevated his play. Because LSU did one good thing. Brian Kelly might not have done a lot of great things. One thing he did do, they recruited the shit out of edge. So
and they surrounded him with playmakers. I have high hopes for him. I have always liked him as a player, and I thought that the criticism of him was a little bit salty by Florida State fans. Sorry.
Oh, brother, he didn't make you 2-10.
No, stupid,
dumb. See y'all tomorrow or Wednesday. Y'all have a good night. Peace.